To the growing concerns over U.S. trade policy, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke in front of the Detroit Economic Club just a short while ago on the relationship between the U.S. and its allies, addressing concerns on the potential impact on U.S. jobs. And joining us for a closer look on this is our Washington correspondent, Mike Viqueira, and here in the studio is our economy correspondent, Westropp-Evans. Asher, tell us a little bit about what Pompeo had to say just a short while ago.
Well, look, this was Pompeo being the statesman. He was really setting out to walk the fine line of firm but fair and trying to reconnect and recast some of the relationships that he had with the U.S. has with its allies. So let's take a listen to some of what he had to say.
It's a simple moral principle, this idea of fairness. As you saw at the G7, President Trump made very clear, we are happy to have 0% tariffs on every product. We are happy to eliminate all subsidies. We'd be thrilled to see non-tariff barriers eliminated in their entirety. If every country does that, we will too, and I am confident that will grow America. Our relationship is not solely defined by trade, and so I'm very confident that when these trade negotiations are completed, that the historic relationships between the United States and Canada and the United States and our European partners will continue the way they have for now 70-odd years with Europe.
Asher, sounds a little like some damage control there from the Secretary of State.
He certainly sounds more optimistic than any analyst or economist.
Absolutely right. And he's looking to perhaps walk back some other elements of the more hardline and hawkish parts of the Trump administration, looking to cast that line, making allusions to history and past relationships that the U.S. has had with their allies in a way that others of the administration are less eager to sort of draw attention to.
Mike, perhaps no coincidence that speech coming in Detroit. The auto industry is one, of course, that is very dependent as part of this supply chain that deals with imports and exports, and President Trump has spoken about that.
Well, particularly in the commodities or the products of steel and aluminum, which have really been sort of the focal point of President's tariff threats and following through on many of those tariffs. And many in Detroit and many in the industrial United States who are still in heavy manufacturing are very concerned that this is going to end up costing them money. It's going to end up costing workers jobs because the things that they make will become more expensive to make and therefore less competitive on account of what the president has threatened to do and in some cases is following up on doing. You know, it's interesting, Caleb and Jordana, what Mike Pompeo appears to be doing. He's sort of casting himself as a free trader, but saying that we're going to engage in a trade war so we can, in effect, bring about the lowering of tariffs and subsidies. And the Secretary of State and others of the administration have said that they're fine with lowering all tariffs, eliminating all tariffs on goods imported to the United States if there's reciprocity, and perhaps even more unlikely, eliminating all subsidies. And some farm commodities and some industries, the sugar industry comes to mind right off the top of the head, might have a very hard time with that. That sugar in particular is something that people have been talking about for years and how unfair and how it plays favorites to some politically powerful people in Florida. So it's all easier said than done, but I agree that Pompeo is putting forth a more reasonable and diplomatic face than we have seen from some of the more bellicose rhetoric on these issues coming from the president.
And while he was trying to defend allies, he wasn't afraid to really mince his words on China, was he?
Well, that's right. But first of all, the G7 really didn't get off the hook. You know, obviously there's a lot of back and forth continuing into this morning between the president, the White House, and staunch allies of the United States, longtime post-war allies like Germany and certainly Canada. But he said there is asymmetric trade with the G7. But you're right. Even as he praised China and Russia for getting on board with the North Korea peace negotiations that the president, of course, has embarked on with his high-profile summit in Singapore last week with Kim Jong-un, he singles out China for what he calls, quote, predatory economics 101 and an, quote, unprecedented level of larceny in trade and the trade imbalance and what the administration sees as unfair trade practices on the part of China. So still talking very tough with China on trade, even as the administration tries to work with it on other diplomatic initiatives.
Asher, in the last few weeks, even months, we've been talking with market analysts here on the Rundown, asking the same question. When are the markets going to start reacting to concerns over trade? Now we see, despite some good economic numbers that came out at the end of last week, the markets all opening down today. It makes you wonder, are they finally getting concerned that this trade war could be serious and could hurt the economies of not just the U.S., but several countries?
Well, look, Alev, all signs do seem to be pointing to yes on that front. Markets are heading down, and we're looking, if today continues on the downward trend that we've already seen, it'll be the 5th day in a row that US markets have dropped, which when you start seeing these going beyond a single day's trading and these sort of smaller issues into a wider trend going on for a week, perhaps longer, then you start to see real concerns. Similarly, the gold, traditionally a safe haven investment and an investment that investors will tend to run towards during periods of difficulty or financial concern, financial risk, has started to steady. It was on a decline as the US dollar strengthened, a traditionally safe and conventional move, but now it's started to hit a plateau and even started to increase a little bit, and we saw today gold go up a bit, which is a sign that investors are afraid and turning to these safe haven investments to insure their assets in case there is a sudden and major drop in the markets.
Mike, I find it almost kind of surreal in Washington that President Trump and Mike Pompeo are talking tough against China on trade, and yet they were ready to try to rescue this tech company, ZTE, and now we see Congress, Republicans and Democrats challenging the administration on it.
Absolutely.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, you know, politics may make strange bedfellows, as the saying goes, where you have a liberal senator from Ohio and Sherrod Brown, who's up for re-election, foursquare behind the president and his protectionist initiatives with regards to tariffs, especially with regard to steel and aluminum and other items of heavy industry. But now you're also starting to see sort of a rebellion among traditional free trade, what we call Chamber of Commerce, or the rarest species of all, the Rockefeller Republicans, the Main Street Republicans, who really are pro-business and don't want to see anything like the road that the president is going down, which has traditionally been reserved for protectionist Democrats and pro-labor Democrats as well. So, as usual, politics is being turned on its head here in the United States, something we've seen over and over again over the past 2 years. Convention, all caution being thrown to the wind. Up is down and down is up, and it remains to be seen how all this is going to shake out politically.